Hi, this is Matt Stait from Martial Arts GB Group, and today I've got the awesome Jamie Clubb with me, and we're going to be having a chat with regards to some of the really interesting things that he's doing, and more importantly, some of the interesting things that he's done. I've been having a little look back over some of his career, and I'm quite interested to dive into some of that a little bit. So, Jamie, how are you, my friend?
I'm very well, Matt. How are you?
I'm great. Yeah, I'm great. Thanks for coming on. And if I could just start by asking you to give a bit of an overview as to who you are, just in case there are people out there that haven't come across you as yet.
Yeah, I am a martial arts instructor from far back as the 1990s, technically speaking. But I've gone in and out of training and then teaching and then training again. But I started teaching the way that I like to teach, the Club Chimera martial arts format, back in about 2004, 2005. My background is a mixture, it's eclectic, hence the Chimera icon that I chose for the logo. So, and I would say if I had to be pinned down and say, what do I teach? I say I teach self-protection, that is comprising personal security and self-defense, and martial arts cross-training using the mixed martial arts model. So that's the quickest way to describe it to people. But I generally specialize in teaching realistic self-protection and cross-training methodology.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so that's as you mentioned there, the Chimera there. That's evocative of essentially some of the journey that you've just talked about. So one of the things that I find interesting with regards to what you do is that I've heard the term the thinking man's martial artist used to describe you, and I say that's something I find interesting because you delve into things far more than just the physical, don't you?
Yeah, the self-protection side of it was what probably prompted a lot on that with me, but also because I suppose it's a testament to the many interesting people that I've worked with, I've trained under, I've interviewed as well. For quite a long time, I was in the seat where you are now, interviewing different people for Martial Arts Magazine. So all that kind of thing, I think, probably rubbed off on me and made me be more thoughtful about my martial arts training on the whole, and looking into things. It's always been, part of the test. When you're training, your physical training, you should be pushing yourself in every area that will make you a better, more rounded individual, I suppose, and that's what I'm looking towards to do. I'm careful to say the word martial artist because everyone's got their own definition of what a martial artist really is. But as a better person, I just think that you should just push yourself in all the ways that you think make yourself a more rounded individual.
No.
So on the thinking side of it, self-protection, very simply, the first thing I learned from the likes of Jeff Thompson and Mo Teague, which are pretty much my main inspirations in that regard, and then later, moving on to other different people, but they were definitely my core inspiration, was that the personal security side was the most important part of it. And once you've gone through the discomfort of doing very pragmatic physical training, when you were had got heavily involved in pressure testing and all that side of it, and that discomfort. Once that started becoming its own sort of uncomfortable, to quote Jeff, that's the comfortable, uncomfortable, shall we say? Then you start looking into other areas, and one of the areas, of course, is personal protection. When you have to look at it and say, well, really, if you're actually really teaching people self-protection, then you should be teaching them all the skills to stop them getting involved in a physical confrontation in the first place. And then you have to start asking harder questions about that. And some of the things that got me into, I suppose, thinking about martial arts more, thinking about martial arts training and all the things that are behind it, was skepticism, critical thinking. There was, I can't really pin down a precise turning point. There were different events in my life. I mean, I come from a traveling circus culture background. I've got travelers on both sides of my family, certainly a long circus lineage on my mother's side for over 300 years. So technically, before circus actually was invented, they were traveling showmen, they were traveling performers, and within all that, and I've got showman connections. Showmen are what we call people who operate fairs or carnivals in the US. We have that as well. We have branched our family off with that. But part of that is the hustle. So you learn about hustlers and things like that. And so, of course, that then gives me a little bit of an insight into some of the things that were happening in the martial arts world and in history and all that part of it, which became really fascinating to me. So that prompted me to think critically. And I thought to myself, well, you can't, one of the things that, the most important thing when you've been involved in putting a show on, whether you're working with a magician, shall we say, or when you're looking at all the, I don't know, the charms of some of the hustles that you see in fairgrounds, and that is you don't drink your own Kool-Aid, you don't believe your own nonsense. So you started to, so that kind of prompted me to look down the route with martial arts. And then what I've discovered is that you have to do a lot of thinking, you have to do a lot of research. I wouldn't call myself particularly educated any more than anyone else, and certainly I don't consider myself being particularly intelligent, but I'm a person who likes to think about things, likes to push themselves to think about things, because it's important that we don't stay comfortable. And I think there are often just easy routes that we can go on, and I was always told to be be very wary of whatever the easy path is in your training, whether it was your research, or it's the physical side of it, or whether it was the mental side of it. So so maybe the thinking man's martial artist came from that part of it, but I think it's also the influence, say, of a lot of different martial artists that I work with too.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, there's some points on that. There was so much within that picking a few bits out, there was obviously the critical thinking is absolutely crucial, and 100% agree with all of that. Again, the uncomfortable positioning, again, if you were, you're saying you were around with Jeff, I presume that's during like the Animal Day kind of period when he was really...
No, later. I was more later, but I got in with Matty Evans. But yes, right, Mo pushed me towards that, and Jeff pushed me towards that, and essentially I went down that route. I went to mixed martial arts gyms. I got involved in various different types of pressure testing. Mo doesn't really grade an instructor without making sure that you go through all that kind of stuff. So yes, you learn that fairly early on. Yes. Sorry, continue.
No, that's okay. Yeah. So the uncomfortable stuff, again, I think I've mentioned this a few times now, is that when I'm talking to people, there seems to be a unified agreement that for the real benefits that martial arts can bring, you have to become uncomfortable at times. That's just part of the deal. Is that something that you agree with?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. If you're comfortable, then you're in the wrong place. I remember back when I was doing Muay Thai, I did an intensive period of Muay Thai. Sadly, my instructor went down a bit of a spiral towards the very end of it. But I kind of migrated from the club. The club wasn't doing great, to be honest. Just personal problems with the instructor, bless him. But at the time, I'd got a Ponchai Crew qualification at that particular point, and in the class, I'd love to have stayed on, and definitely, I would never have considered myself to be a particularly good Mak Muay or anything like that. But within my class, I was, amongst the top, people who were training at that time, and overall, I was very comfortable in the stand-up range. Not to say there weren't plenty of people who could hand me my ass. That used to happen on a regular basis, with plenty of other places that could do that, and I was still exploring that, but I was generally comfortable within the stand-up range. So I knew I had to get deeper into grappling, and then, obviously I was cross-training with Matty Evans, and he was giving me a lot of great stuff in personal one-to-one training that we were doing with both stand-up and ground. But I knew I had to go to BJJ just to have a look at what the ground was like. And I just remember just that feeling in that week. I'd gone from one lesson where I was, holding my own very comfortably, stand up, and then suddenly I was getting schooled by a white belt, and the excitement you get from that's amazing. But then it also brought back my time when I went to my first official Muay Thai lesson, and I had a background of European and American kickboxing, so I understood low kicks, and we'd thrown plenty of knees into pads, and we had experimented with a bit of knees in sparring and stuff like that. And so we had done that, but essentially it was kickboxing, is what we collectively generally call kickboxing. So it was either kicks above the waist and sweeps, and normal Western boxing, or it was low kicks permitted sort of sparring, which I'd generally done with an instructor that I'd worked with for about 4.5 years. And I went to a Muay Thai class at last, and I went, okay, I'm going to actually do the real thing. So I went to Muay. I remember that first night, the instructor, bless him, and again, I probably should have seen the signs early on, because he was a great guy, but a real character. But on the first, he knew I had a background in full contact, so he put me straight into the sparring lesson. And so I said, I've got no other slots for you. No, sorry, I've got no other slots for you. And I was going, that's all right, I'm a beginner. And people who know me, the last thing I am is, you know, in your face sort of antagonistic. I'm quite a placid guy, I like to say on the whole. But, you know, once you told the background, you know, he wasn't going to take any chances, so he threw me straight in with his seniors and that. And I remember going through that lesson and just coming out of it and just going, oh my God, you know, this is a different league. And I remember being on the phone to an old freestyle karate guy that I knew called Israel Robert McKenzie, long time ago, and he was a real collected fighter, but he had a good background in general, sort of in fighting as well. I always held him up in a high esteem. I went, I know I've got to go back here. I know I've got to go back to that club. So because why? Because I'm getting beaten. Because I went that lesson, I'm getting beaten, and it's just a new area for me. And I said, and I just need advice. How do I stay alive? You know, and so we started going, you know, use that front kick, use that front kick. You know, keep them away to begin with that. And I loved it. I stuck in with that, and it was, you know, many times I ate the mat, and but it was just, by the end of it, it was great. And then when I came out of it and went into BJJ, it was feeling that same experience again. I just got excited. It just became an organic process just to go on with. So yeah, I found that that's what pressure testing often does. But I've often found that some of the problems I find that my mistakes are what guide me in my teaching and my training. So a lot of my training methods are based from mistakes that I've made and mistakes that I know other teachers have made and mistakes that I see and observe in the martial arts industry. So although people often see me as being quite critical, a lot of the time, I don't think those criticisms aren't come straight back to me. Nearly all the drills and things that when people say, you know, are either unique to me or interest me, a good percentage of those are actually built off blatant mistakes I've made in classes, things that I've really noticed when I've seen my students do things and I've gone, oh, how have I taught that behaviour? I've got to correct that behaviour quickly, you know. And then I've obviously, you know, I tend to be a sort of person that, you know, when a teacher throws you a ball, I really run with it. So it's the same thing with a mistake. So when I go to correct that mistake, I almost overcompensate with it and start turning it into something else. But I don't say overcompensate, but you start building this extra knowledge and information. So yeah, you know, that's often is what's prompted me, and that's probably what makes me very much into the cross training side too.
Yeah, the cross training side of things is easy because I wanted to pick up on that a little bit because I had a day that I wrote about it in one of my books where I for some reason my schedule was really tight during that time, and so I'd arranged 2 training sessions with 2 people. One of them was a world-class high-level points fighter. The other one was a pretty decent BJJ guy, MMA guy, and in the morning, I went off to this points guy, and he literally tap danced on my face all day long. He was like trying to nail smoke to a wall. The guy's movement was so quick, and his range was just incredible. And he was in and out, and I'm like, I desperately trying to hit him. I wasn't getting very far. Anyway, I went away from that thinking, oh, it's all good, because in a real fight, I grab hold of him, I drag him to the floor, and, you know, I get him that way. Anyway, in the afternoon, I turned up for the second training class of the day. This is when I was a bit more young and vigorous. And I had exactly the same problem, but this time on the ground. I was folded up like laundry repeatedly, and it was like, oh, it's okay, because, you know, I'd knock him out before he got hold of me, you know. And it was one of them where I went home that day and I thought, you know what, I'm just lying to myself here.
Oh, I've been there. I can relate completely, Matt. It's exactly, no, absolutely. Don't think I didn't come out of those being all humble and all that. I'm not gonna, you know, I wasn't all humble and that part of it. Or there was all the excuses in the world were coming out of this, and I had to make peace for myself. And it's funny how, you know, you realise you sort of have to do with that in the short term. I think it's a bit of a sort of a band-aid at the moment, but then if you've got the willingness to learn, if you actually have got that drive to learn, then you have to unpick that and go, you know what, I'm lying to myself. I am lying to myself, and now it's good I've acknowledged I've lied to myself. Now I need to move on with that, because, you know, there's so you just realise just how much there is so much vast knowledge and wisdom, experience out there when you go to the training, and it just becomes so exciting. And then eventually, it's when you get to that stage when you want to then pass that straight over to other people. It's great, and you can tell them, you know, there's a hell of a story attached to this one. You know what I mean? And they know that you're not just hearing just because Sensei said so, because Sifu said so, because Crew said so. It's because you go, no, this is how I got beaten. Okay, and this is how I know why this wasn't working. But one of the things is that, you know, when you look at the stuff, like, I really think that you know, this is why, you know, the essence, you know, why sparring is so good when it comes to the physical side of it all. It's sparring. I found with a lot of my early training with martial arts, I went for a period where sparring wasn't happening every lesson. Okay, so and it wasn't a usual thing, you know. So you would spar and it would happen, but it wasn't what you expected to do every lesson. So you get to like, am I going to spar or not? And I noticed there was like a fear would start to build up. You know, with students, and they start becoming, you know, because people are aversive. The bottom line is, you know, most of us, because we're not sociopaths, we you know, we have an aversion to interpersonal violence. You know, we might suddenly have a want to express it all of a sudden, like you might see something that enrages you on the news, or there's some like I call it self-righteous porn that you see on social media. You know, someone shows you some terrible incident where an animal's been badly treated, or a child's been badly treated, and it's got absolutely no connection to helping anything at all. There's no connection to a charity. There's no connection to dobbing this person into the police, to finding connection. It's not helping anybody. All it's done is arise this immediate response in everybody, this anger and frustration that people get out, and you're going, right, so you've upset me. That's all you've done here. So we've just looked at this. So this is what I call like self-righteous porn. So you kind of get that. So people do have that natural expression. But generally speaking, we don't like to fight. We don't like to fight. But it's in us. Yet it's like a harmony, because actually it's in us. It's in our part of our instinct. So sparring, you know, can bring that out in different ways. And whether you're doing, and I understand the difference, don't be wrong, I make an absolute distinction between self-defense pressure testing and consensual violence match fight pressure testing. I think there's a distinctive difference between them. Yes. There's substantial overlap, and I always look at the consensual violence one as being this huge area that we can draw loads of information from, and it's helped to inform and improve the self-defense stuff. But the self-defense stuff has to be kept small, it has to be kept refined, and it has to be kept on a very asymmetrical dynamic, I believe. And it's pretty closer to what you'd call in the consensual violence specific sparring. So there is definitely a distinctive difference. But anyway, back to the point, the simple point of actual all over either sparring or pressure testing. Getting people used to doing it, I think, is really, really important. You know, once you've got them over that fear until they can actually sort of engage in it, and also to get them to, you know, to take it up different levels. You know, to get them to play. This is the thing: getting people to play a bit more. So, you know, where you can work within. You know, you can full contact spar without going full contact. You know, things like that on a regular basis. You're not getting people getting brain damage all the time, as we all know. They do it in, you know, most boxing gyms do it. You know, certainly in Thailand, you know, Muay Thai, we know they spar very light because they're having to fight nearly every week. So, you know, this is what turns out. It's a lot of MMA gyms. I mean, I appreciate, you know, you've got like Dutch kickboxing where it's often quite aggressive, and there's lots of stuff, and that's some great stuff in there as well. But I think on the whole, you know, just to get people just used to like understanding that this is part of the deal. You're gonna fight. You know, you're gonna fight. It's gonna be organised. It's gonna be safe as much as possible. But you're gonna fight because it's. And again, that also there's also a huge emotional part of that. There's a huge mental part of that comes from it. There's a wonderful honesty to it too. Whereas if you don't do it enough, if you don't do some form of pressure testing, this then breeds false ideas and false assumptions and things like that, and it will mutate, because whatever you do, it will mutate. I mean, there are problematic mutations you can find in pressure testing and sparring as well. I've done a piece, a podcast I did called Playing the Combat Game, and I've done one half of, there will be a two-part podcast on a video version of it, but you can get it on a podcast now anyway. Playing the Combat Game it's called, and did an essay on it as well, and it just looked at the way that people will naturally mutate and change in line with the rules, such as, I don't know, like a boxer who's won 11 rounds and then hangs on in the 12th. Do you know what I mean? Where the other, that's a classic example, isn't it? So you look at that and you go, okay. So let's say you've won 10 rounds on points, but now you're out of gas in round 11. Okay, but the other guy suddenly is a late starter and he's fresher than you clearly, and he's landing more shots. All you've got to do is hang on now. If you hang on for those 2 rounds, you know, you can win. You know what I mean? Because you're head on points. So if you can hang on for that round. But is that combat? You know, how far does that go into combat in any shape or form? You know, that's why, you know, say, you know, Muay Thai tends to have a different way of judging as well, which I think is quite interesting. How you that's not possible. You can't hang on for that last round. But you know, different sports, you know, you'll use different things. I'll never forget. You know, I never did any good in BJJ competition, but I remember I was in a match, and I remember my teachers going, I remember Hallie just going, push him and push him into the penalty zone, because somebody got a hold on me and just pushed him into the penalty zone, so that's using the game, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? That's a classic example. That's using the rules of the game to work. Muhammad Ali's rope-a-dope, it was using the rules of the game to work to wear George Foreman down in a war of attrition. But really, is that, how much is that combat? It's strategy, but it's strategy that could only be used within the confines of the sport. There really isn't a rope-a-dope that people do in MMA because of the cage, because they haven't got that impact to go on. People say it's a type of rope-a-dope, but it's not. The whole point of the rope-a-dope, or the turtle shell, as Archie Moore called it before he taught it to Muhammad Ali, was to absorb the impact on the back of the ropes. But that's just a classic example. Things like the donkey guard in BJJ, does that have a combative object when you're turning your back on somebody and scissoring them from behind? It doesn't have you wouldn't do that as a self-defense technique. It would be very, very low on your list of things to do in self-defense technique, and you wouldn't find it in a mixed martial arts competition. But you can find it great in a BJJ competition because the rules allow it to work. Fencing, we've got footage of duels in the early part of the 1900s, actual duels. You can find this on YouTube, where people are dueling to the point where one person can't continue. So they're using live blades, no protection, and they're going for it. Compare that to Olympic fencing, and compare that to the Olympic fencing of the time, because there is footage of it. There is no comparison, because it's a total different thing. In Olympic fencing, you can go for broke. It's whoever touches the other guy first wins, right? So if that's all you're doing, then you don't care what he does to you afterwards. But that doesn't happen. But if you were using a live blade, what would that mean? Do you know what I mean? You couldn't afford to have that. So that's just, so you do see mutations into things. And again, I think that's why critical thinking is so important all along the way. That's why we always have to keep constantly questioning ourselves and questioning where we're going. Yeah.
Well, that's really where the cross training has the most benefit, I think, in the sense that it's very hard. If you only stick in one lane and only do one thing, it's very easy to pretend something isn't actually what it is sometimes.
Yes.
Yes. Whereas with regards to cross training and going into different arenas, going into different skill sets, different rule bases, all that kind of thing, it really does expose a level of knowledge that you wouldn't have got into otherwise. So, I mean, it's a great leveler, I think. And also it really shows the measure of a person to be able to get to a level and a standard, and then give all that up and cast aside that ego to go and do something else and start right at the bottom of the pile again. I mean, that takes a bit of doing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's in that, again, I call it the calypso effect, when somebody, you just described there, when somebody gets into a system and they start reimagining situations and resetting their goals, or they start saying, well, I don't really need to learn how to strike because this is going to happen and that's going to happen, or they go, I don't need to know how to grapple because if I'm good enough at my striking, I'll never need to know how to grapple, or I don't need to learn any extra techniques that are not allowed in my sport. And so that I call that the calypso effect, because it's like the Odyssey with when Odysseus went away from Troy and gets stuck on an island where Calypso tries to mesmerize him, stop him from wanting to go home. And I always think that happens in martial arts. You get into a martial arts system and it's like you're on this wonderful island where you go, oh, this is wonderful, this is really, really good. And you kind of like go, I'll just buy into everything that they want that's happening within this subculture. And it's not necessarily something that is being done badly by the instructors, and it's not a direct criticism of the art. I'm never really criticizing the art. It's people within the system and the natural way that humans do it. You end up within this thing and you go, why do I really want to get back into that? Why do I want to, I'm enjoying this so much. And it's fine if you admit that. Fine if you say and you admit that, because I do. I love getting into it. When I teach people cross training, I never go into when we do boxing, I never go to my clients, okay, but this is how we do it in the street. Okay, but this is how we don't, we go, look, we're going to box. Okay, we're going to box at the moment, and we're going to work within the confines of boxing. We can do Muay Thai, we're going to work with Muay Thai. We're going to do stand-up grappling, then we're going to work within the basic wrestling premise, So we're not going to keep, having this constant thing about, oh yes, well this would happen. That's later, that's when you bring it back to your self-protection line, your original line. That's when you do your normal, but when you do self-protection stuff, you don't then automatically bring something from that art into it. You re-practice what you've done already. That's what I always say. You re-practice what you've done already and see how it's improved. So if you've learned, let's say, a right cross off the fence, and then you've learned it as a self-protection thing, and you've learned how to hit hard, you've learned how to hit it from different ranges, you've learned it on a simple course, and that's great. Then you go to boxing, okay, and you learn to do boxing. So now you're doing crosses almost by stealth, you know, as in it's being mixed into combinations. I mean, Ian Abernethy was like learning a technique by stealth, and you do that. And then you go back to your self-protection, and then suddenly now your right cross should be better. Now it should be improved. Or your palm strike, your rear palm, unless you're teaching a rear palm strike, the mechanics are the same. You just go, okay, we'll just open a hand. But yeah, now your body mechanics are the same because you've learned it better. You've learned it against people who used to slipping that technique, used to blocking that technique at a far higher level. So now you learn it from self-protection. Now that's even better. And then sometimes you can find that, I always find that martial arts can shape sometimes the way that we learn with self-protection in a positive way. The hook is a classic example. I discussed this with Chris Hansen just recently. Hooks are quite different how we now would like to teach it in self-protection. Unless you're teaching an ear slap, if you're teaching a hook, it's been informed by the way we wear gloves. In a positive way, up to the sort of the bare knuckle times, and I'm talking about the pre-boxing bare knuckle times. I'm not talking about the bare knuckle stuff we see today or the gypsy bare knuckle fighting. I'm talking about the up to the sort of the John L. Sullivan, switch over, sort of the 1900 sort of time. That the hooks then were thrown a lot more like clubbing techniques. There were swings. There were a lot more swings. We only by putting the gloves on and getting used to fighting other people with the gloves on and allowing us to punch more, were we able to get our hooks a lot more sophisticated, because we're within those confines of the rules, just as you said, because some of the confines of the rules makes you better and can make the other stuff better. And I found it definitely the most scary experience I've ever had in training, in formal martial arts training, was in wrestling, when I did freestyle wrestling. Yeah. Out of everything, I was a 3-stripe blue belt in BJJ, and I went to my first wrestling class. I'd done no gi alongside at the same time. I'd done the stuff with Jeff, and Matty with all the grappling and that. And they'd always warned me. They said, get into wrestling, it's something else. And I go, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. So I had all the, I knew I heard how good it was, but knowing it sort of mentally and actually feeling it was something else. And I went, this is terrifying. This is terrifying. I think it's because I was older as well. When you're, so you're like going, oh my God, that ground is really, when you're being thrown up into the air and you're looking down. And it was different to judo as well, just because you just get thrown so high and there's nothing to hold on to. And you go, I can land on my head any moment now. And just that and the defense for takedowns, but again, the rules. Suddenly you had rules where they were much stricter on negative gameplay. So things that you would normally do maybe in judo or Brazilian jiu-jitsu, where you would draw somebody in, stuff like that, that would be considered quite negative in wrestling. You have to be a lot more subtle. You have to be a lot closer to it, and you learn this thing where so it was a fabulous experience for me. And I found it more terrifying than doing any MMA training I'd done. And yet that had far more rules than mixed martial arts, and yet it was a more terrifying experience. It didn't make it any softer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, funnily enough, that's one of the ones that I remember is the Olympic wrestling guys. I went and did a little bit of that, and my goodness me, the strength was off the scale, and the standard and the fitness standards as well. That was the other thing I remember specifically was just the warm-up would kill me.
Yeah. Conditioning is amazing, isn't it? And the funny thing is that you often find that if you're in a circle of people, there's those who've had some experience in wrestling, and those that haven't, and you'll see the people who are trying to do, like, often defending against it. And any person who's done wrestling experience and they're looking at somebody who hasn't had it, there's that complete look on the face, and they're going, good luck.
There's a certain breed of people that definitely. So basically, mate, I'm afraid we're running out of time. I mean, it's fantastic chatting to you, and I could literally keep this up all day, but I'm aware of time scales. So what I really would like to know now is, how can people find you if they're interested in what you're doing and want to know a bit more about you?
Okay, well, the hub really is the Club Chimera website. So that's clubchimera.com. I don't know if you put a link up at all for that, but it's CLUBBCHIMERA.com, clubchimera.com. And there you'll find my blog. I blog every lesson I teach, every seminar I teach. There is an anonymous blog that I put up there to tell you what the content was of the lesson, so people can see a regular update what I teach, and they can go all the way back over the years to see that. There's a link to my YouTube channel, and my podcast is all through there. Obviously, I'm on Facebook, Club Chimera Facebook page, and Instagram as well. And I suppose I will get round to TikTok sometime.
Yeah, well, shout me up when you do. So basically, my friend, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and it really is good to actually catch up finally, because as I said, I've been an admirer of your work for many years, and I didn't mention it, but I was going to say, actually, I mean, I remember sitting down with that DVD, the cross training in the martial arts one that you had, and absolutely devouring all of that and really enjoying it. So yeah, it's great to finally be able to actually sort of say hello. So thank you very much for taking part and for chatting, and it'd be great to catch up again soon.
Thank you, Matt. It's been an honour and a pleasure to be on the show. Thank you.